This is week 2 of a series simply entitled Safe People. It is drawn from this book, which if you would like to read it, or maybe your Grove would like to discuss it, it is available for purchase back there on that small table at the back of the worship area. This is a book that is very simply about how to have healthy, safe relationships in your life and how to identify those that aren't. How you yourself can become more of a safe person for other people instead of unsafe. And I told the story at the start of the message last week that in my 20-ish years, 25 years of being a pastor, there are only a couple other times that I can think of when I saw an entire group of people really changed, where God really dug into their lives together and effected tremendous transformation within the group, not just an individual life. And one of those times was when my last church before this one all studied this book together. That's part of why I decided we would do this series. Another major reason why is that as you and I are committed together to the principles of loving our neighbors as Jesus gave us, you just find out that that's not easy. It is a wonderful thing to say and to value, but it is messy. And the more you get close to people, the more you become open with people, the more you reach out to people who are unfamiliar or uncomfortable, you realize it's not easy at all. So we needed to do a series about what you do when you're committed as a person to the neighborly love way of life, and then you find out that maybe it's not all that you thought it would be. Last week, I just gave you an overview of the Bible's perspective on this subject. It is actually woven into one of the ways to envision the entire plot or story of the Bible. Your Bible, in the message that it gives, in the story that it tells, is a big circle from cover to cover. God made the world a certain way. The world was undone by the choices of humanity. And through Jesus, God is trying to remake the world. And now through the efforts of Jesus' people, the church. This is the story of the Bible. Safe people is part of that. God made the world for us to be safe for one another. But we chose not to be safe for one another, and it had damaging consequences. But then, through Jesus, he pointed the way back to what God originally designed, what he originally intended for all of us, which is to be safe for each other. And inch by inch, choice by choice, we as Christian people deciding to live Jesus' way are clawing our way back to being safe people. Today, we are going to talk about unsafe people. You can barely see the U and the N up there. I apologize for that. Unsafe people. On your chairs or on your tables today is a very long description. It is one page. I refuse to go over one page of the traits that blue-covered book I mentioned give you in 2 chapters for what unsafe people are like. This yellow page is my best bet or best shot at summarizing 2 entire chapters of a book for you. I would love for you to take this with you and have this with you as a resource about unsafe people. Remember last week, here's the dictionary definition of what it means to be safe. And in the English language, safe tends to mean one of 2 things. It means that you are secure or free from harm, injury, danger, or risk, like a safe place. Or you are dependable and trustworthy, like a safe guide or a safe coach or a safe teacher. Safe is not a word that the Bible uses a great deal. if at all, about people, but the Bible speaks over and over about those ideas about being safe. If that's the definition of what safe is, then you need to flip it or invert it to get a very short, succinct definition of what unsafe is. Unsafe people make you feel insecure. Unsafe people are people around whom you fear on occasion. Unsafe people make you feel at risk. They make you feel like you might get hurt. And unsafe people are not trustworthy. They are not dependable. Now, there are going to be two reactions, generally speaking, to what we talk about today. There's going to be one person who hears everybody else in their life in what we talk about today. They're not going to hear themselves. That's okay if that's you, if you're in that group, just know that about yourself. Then the flip side is there's going to be other people in the audience who only see themselves. And they're going to hear that everything I talk about today is them. Neither polar response is healthy. The truth is, for you and I and everybody in the room, you live in an unsafe world. In fact, as you listen to me today, or as you read through that yellow summary sheet, I'll guarantee you that everybody in the room has at least one unsafe person close to them right now. Could be a friend, could be a family member, could be a spouse, could be a child. But you have somebody who is unsafe. But let me also guarantee you that you are also unsafe. The people who are the most unsafe in the room are the ones who are unwilling to admit it. If you remember what I said last week, part of how you can understand the spiritual journey of a Christian person is that God is taking you from being unsafe to safe for others. That means at any given moment in your life, you have both the traits of a safe and an unsafe person, and you ought to be able to know what those are. This is how you should respond to today. There is no guilt to be had by you and I hearing or seeing ourselves in the subject of being unsafe. It's just part of being human. So I hope that you are at least willing to admit that much. Instead of covering that entire yellow sheet, which would be impossible, what I chose to do today is I'm just going to take a deeper dive into only two of the subjects that are covered on that yellow sheet. Subjects that probably are going to be applicable to most of us, if not all of us. And the second one will be one that tends to come up a lot in what non-Christians or unchurched people say about Christian people. So I thought we'd talk about it. And then actually at the end we're going to touch on a third. So here's the first subject we need to talk about when we talk about unsafe people. And I want to use this verse from Ephesians chapter 4, which is in your New Testament, a short letter written to a prominent church in what is today southwest Turkey. The Apostle Paul writes to these Christian people, "Therefore, put away falsehood toward one another, and let each of you speak the truth with his neighbor. Because, or for, we are members of, or are organically and dependently connected to one another." It is that last phrase that if you've been in church, you probably have heard before, but that's the one I want to call your attention to. The Bible's perspective is that every single human being, by their very nature, is organically, intrinsically connected to other people. You are not just you. You are also part of an us. This is the way you can think of it. A human being, from the Christian perspective, needs to view themselves as an I and a we. And you are both equally. You are an I and you are a we. And this simple concept can radically change some of the most basic fundamental questions that you and I ask ourselves. They change the answers to those questions. Who are you? Well, if you were to ask me that, I could come up with any number of things. I'm a music lover. I'm an amateur cook. I'm a pastor. I was a power lifter in college. I like Converse Chuck Taylors, but don't wear them anymore because I don't know that they're fitting for a 45-year-old. And on down the line it goes. In America, we tend to overemphasize the I and undersell the we. This is what you need to see. Actually, if I take the Bible's vantage point as my own, then the statements that I just gave you are incomplete. They may all be true. I may be a lifelong learner. I may be someone who loves the outdoors and is invigorated by hiking and the desert and things like that. All of that is true. The problem is those are all I statements. Here are some we statements about me that are equally true. And they are equally a part of who I am at any given moment. I am what my son thinks I am. I am what my wife feels about me. I am my last conversation with my daughter. I am the impression that I leave on someone when we talked before church. I'm not just the words I said. I am the nonverbal impact that I had in that conversation. What's best about you? Again, if we're not careful, we define that as, I have a high IQ, I'm a successful businessman, and on down the line. Actually, you want to know what's best about you? It's what other people feel is best about you. That's at least equally true in answer to the question of what's best about you. What would other people say is best about you? Do you know that they are at least as accurate in that assessment as you are about yourself? You are an I, you are a we. This is what it means to be human. This sounds like a simple concept, perhaps, but it will radically transform your life to realize you are not just an independent being. You are also a fully dependent being who can only exist well in relationships with other people. The great Christian English poet John Donne said famously, "No man is an island, entire unto himself." A recent Christian philosopher said it this way, "Where there is one human being, there are no human beings." That's what it means to be an I and a we. And here's how this relates to being unsafe. If this is the biblical perspective on what it means to be you, to be a fully functioning, thriving human being, when we get the I and the we out of balance, we become unsafe for ourselves and for other people. Oh, actually, let me read this for you. I forgot this was there. This is one of the great Christian psychologists of the last 50 years named M. Scott Peck. And I'll give him the last word about what it means to live as an I and a we in balance as a human being. He writes, "We can never be whole in and of ourselves as humans. Left alone, there's a point beyond which our sense of self-identity and development not only becomes inaccurate and misdirected, but even proud and self-defeating. We are inevitably relational creatures who desperately need each other, not merely for sustenance, not merely for company, but for any meaning, any joy, and any real growth in our lives whatsoever." That's a great snapshot of what it means to live well as an I and a we equally. However, some people that you know, let me suggest that it could be you. In fact, let me suggest that in this slide and the next slide, you are going to have a tendency toward one or the other extreme. Everybody in the room is like this. The first category of being unsafe is that you have an inflamed I and you have a diminished we. Your I is very large and your sense of we is much smaller. They are out of balance, and this makes you unsafe. There are people in your world right now, friends and family, who have a very large sense of I and a small sense of we, and that alone makes them unsafe for you and the other people around. Now, what's that mean, though? What's that look like? Here's part of it. They like people. They enjoy people. They may even have fun with people, but they don't need people. Let me stress the word need. They don't need people. Every significant need in their life, they meet for themselves. They are their own best counsel. They are their own best problem solvers. They are their own best emotional support. They are their own best recreation and partner. What is it in your life right now that somebody else is doing for you that you cannot do for yourself? You should have an answer to that question. And the answer can't be nothing. And see, this is different, right? I'm a family man. You know that. I have a wife. I have 2 kids. Many of you are married. Many of you have kids. If you're not, you still have very close friends and family. And on the surface of it, you say, well, it's obvious I need them and they need me. Really? If I extracted your conversations with them out of your life, what would you lose? What are they doing for you that you don't do for yourself or can't? You share a home, awesome. You cook meals together, fantastic. You help your son with his homework, that's great. He's getting a lot from you. What need are they meeting for you that you can't get anywhere else? Someone with an inflamed sense of I believes they're an individual, they are an independent being, and they are not dependent on other people for fundamental needs in their life. You can't be happy without other people. You can't enjoy life without significant relationships and intimacy with other people. Some of you are introverts, some of you are extroverts. You will do it in different ways. Some of you do it in great high volume, some of you do it in very low volume. It doesn't matter. As a human being, the we is as essential to you as the I. And someone with an inflamed sense of I doesn't get that. This is why they lack empathy. This is why they don't understand that when they say something that's curt or clueless emotionally, that other people get hurt. And they think, well, that just person needs to toughen up. They shouldn't take it personally. No, they're taking it like a we. And if you weren't such a big I, you'd understand that. And maybe the most insightful thing about people like this is they always act like everybody's parent. This is how they come off to other people. They're the ones who are always giving the advice. They're always the ones fixing the problem. They are the ones who are always taking responsibility for things to go well. They're always the smartest, wisest person in the room. And they know it, even if they don't say it. You may have people in your life who always make you feel like a child around them. Yeah, that's on purpose. They're doing it because their I is engorged. It is far too large. And their we is far too small. They have an overinflated sense of themselves. Is this the one half of the spectrum that you tend toward? What you have to understand is that when you have a bad day even, and you come off like this, when you live disconnected to other people, you are sending the signal to them that you are not safe. They can't trust you. You have it together in a way that they don't, or at least you seem to think so, and they can't trust you. You make them afraid when you act like this. Here's the flip side, of course. It's to have a much smaller sense of I and a much larger sense of we. This is what is commonly called in pop psychology codependency, or being enmeshed. This is the kind of person who cannot be okay if everyone else is not okay. If everything in their life is not okay, then they can't be okay. And yes, half of the room, a significant portion of the room, tends toward this end of the unsafe spectrum. You take upon your shoulders responsibility for everyone's well-being. And when they are not well, you can't be happy. You may have had people in your past who made you feel that way, which is why now this is how you conduct yourself in your family life. This is the person who, instead of always coming across like a parent, tends to seem like they're always a child. They're always the one in need. They're always the one who is leaning on you. They're always the one asking for something. They're always the one who seem like they're lost and they don't have any idea what they're doing. And so they ask other people to put their world together, to fix them, to make them right. And you love these people, but they're exasperating sometimes. Because you get the sense around these people, I can't do for you what you're asking me to do. I can do some of it. I will provide for some of your need. I'm part of your we. I understand that. But fundamentally, you're responsible for doing some of these things that I can't for you. These are perpetual children. And they too are unsafe people when they act like this. They too make you feel insecure. They too make you feel at risk. You never know what they're going to ask. You never know when they're going to get mad that you haven't done enough for them. You never know when they're going to blow up simply because they're trying to hold their world together and make everybody happy, and that's impossible to do, and they get so frustrated that they blow their top, and that makes them unsafe. Which are your tendencies? Is your tendency toward I, or is your tendency toward we? This is what makes us unsafe for each other. Now here's the other thing I want to talk about today. This is the subject that often comes up between Christians and non-Christians, namely unchurched people will say it about Christians. And it is, as the book describes, a trait of unsafe people. And that is, unsafe people judge others. Have you heard that lobbed your way as a Christian person? I'm sure you have. We judge others. What I'd like to do is give you a minute to see what that actually looks like. Let's not just leave it there as the placard, as the cliche on the poster board. What does it mean to judge other people, and why is it unsafe? Here's part of what it means. This is from the story of the prophet Samuel in the Old Testament going to Jesse's house and anointing Israel a king. But the Lord counsels Samuel that when you get there, you need to be careful. You need to see things the way that I do, not the way that human beings do. Because when you first get there, the firstborn son is going to come in first, and the assumption is going to be that the firstborn son will be the one who will be Israel's king. He's the biggest, he's the firstborn, he's the most successful, he is the heir to his father's inheritance and house. Of course, he will be the king. And actually, if you know the story, that is not the case. He was not the king. A younger, much less accomplished son of Jesse became king. His name was David. And that's because, God says to Samuel, human beings tend to look on the outside. God looks on the inside. Here's what it means to judge. Here's why it's an unsafe behavior. Every human being does this. It's how you and I are wired, and it's okay to admit it. We are not that dissimilar from some of the creatures in the animal kingdom. There's a reason why the most fertile females gravitate toward the biggest, youngest, strongest creatures of their particular species. It's because they're going on what they see and what they hear. They're going on the physical things that they can observe. We're not that different. That's why studies have shown that if two people go into an interview, the person who is overweight is much more significantly less likely to get the job than the person who is physically fit. If two people go into a job interview and one is older or balding, that person is much less likely to get the job than the person who is younger and looks it. If two people go into a job interview and it's a white-collar job, the person who is wearing the nicer clothes will more often than not get the job. These are sociological facts. Why is that so? Because you and I go on what we see and what we hear and what we observe a lot. And that's to judge people. Because God would advise us that there is far more to knowing people than just what we see. When was the last time somebody surprised you with who they turned out to be? That you had a first impression about them based on whatever reason. How frumpy they were, how they talked, where they lived, whatever. And as you got to know them, you found out they were nothing like your first impression. Hopefully that's happened to you. Here's the real bummer about first impressions. Do you know they're almost impossible to change? This too is a sociological fact. Once you form an opinion about somebody quickly based on what you see or what you hear, it is very hard to change it for most human beings. You think about that person, what you thought about that person the first time that you met them. How terrible is that? I don't know about you, but I would hate to be handicapped by only being defined for you and other people by the first time they met me. Yet it happens all the time, apparently. This is unsafe behavior. This is what it means to judge people. To assume things. To think that because of what you heard one time, that defines who the person is. Because you observe the person make one mistake one time, that defines who the person is. This is what we as human beings tend to do, and it makes us unsafe for each other. Jesus says very famously these words in the Gospel of Matthew about judging. Judge not, he says, so that you won't be judged. For how you judge is how you yourself will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but you don't notice the log that is in your own eye? Here is also, according to Jesus, some of what makes judging so unsafe. The first thing you have to realize is that when you choose to judge other people for superficial reasons, based on only what you've seen or one experience of them, you are creating a world that ripples and echoes with judgment. And eventually that will come back around on you. So says Jesus. If you judge other people, you yourself will be judged, said the man. The measuring stick you use with other people is the one that ultimately will come back around on you. In this way, human beings get to create the world in which they live. If you choose to be someone who goes on what you see or what you hear, and you allow that to inform your opinion about others, then you are creating that world. And the others around you will be so affected. Moms and dads, if this is how you talk about people at your home, you are creating a world of judgment. You know for whom? Your children. And those children, if they're not careful, will grow up to have children who will also be judgmental. and the ripple effect continues. Are you the person at work who gossips about people in this way? And you talk about one little thing you heard, or one little thing you saw, or one little bad experience you had with somebody. And the echo starts. And then somebody else does the same thing, and somebody else does the same thing, and all of a sudden you've created a world for yourself into which judgment just happens to you and to everybody else. And of course, Jesus says the irony about judgmental people is that they may think they have a very acute measuring stick about others, but sadly, the person that they have the poorest measuring stick about is themselves. They think that the problems of other people are so big and so escalated, and why on earth can't this person get it all together? And they're missing the point that the person with the biggest problem in their life is them. And they can point to problems in somebody else's life that sure do seem like they're a redwood tree, but Jesus would say to them, stop. Your own problems, your own sins, and the issues that plague you internally are immeasurably larger yet. Unsafe people think the problem with the world is other people. Unsafe people think that everybody else needs to get their stuff together and then finally things would work the way they need to. A safe person realizes, I have a log in my own eye, and it will take me my life to extract it with God's help. Who am I to judge other people when they have a speck of dust in theirs? What you need to see as someone who wants to be safe, what you need to see as someone that Christ is calling to be safe for other people, we all have the tendency to do this. It's just human nature. And God is trying to save you from it. Don't do what comes instinctive. Don't do what comes inherent to human beings. Don't judge based on one mistake or one problem or one experience or something you've seen. Be a little different. Be like God's counsel to Samuel. Be like what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. Let me summarize this particular part of what it looks like to be unsafe with these 4 quotes. One writer said, "Do not judge others because they sin differently than you do." That is exactly what Jesus is talking about in Matthew chapter 7. This one scholar writes, when you judge other people, you think that you're defining them, that you know who they are, and you can give a short glossary summary of their character and the entirety of their lives just by your assessment of them. He says, however, guess what? That is not what you're doing. You are defining yourself. Your judgment or assessment of that person is very likely at least incomplete. What is not incomplete is that the more you think you have a God's eye view on anybody's life, you are defining yourself. And ultimately, you're trapping yourself in that corner, a corner of hubris and pride, where you have elevated yourself to the level of the divine. Third, this is extremely insightful. We tend to judge other people by their behavior. You know how we judge ourselves? By our intentions. We judge other people by what they do or what they actually say. When we think about ourselves, we think about what we meant to do, what we hoped would happen when we said something or what we did. Imagine how the world would change, how much safer we would be for each other if we didn't judge each other's behavior, but instead we gave each other the benefit of the doubt and said, I believe you had good intention, whether or not the behavior or the words matched. And then, of course, there is no one better than the late Mother Teresa, who said very simply, When you judge somebody, sadly, you have no time to love them. And fundamentally, that's why judging other people, which is a condition known to all human beings, those sitting in this room, the one preaching right now, that's why it's ultimately so dangerous. Is because to judge is to make us incapable of loving others. So now what do? This is not meant to be a guilt trip Sunday. This is not meant for me to give you some kind of club or cudgel that you can now use on some of the people in your life. What do? Well, the first thing you need to do is you may need to reassess or look anew at some of the people in your life. You are right, Christian person. You are called to love everybody. Jesus would go as far as to say, that means your enemies too. You love them all. There are no exceptions. The person you like the least, the person you get along with the least, yes, follower of Jesus, you are called to love them. However, you are not called to trust them. You are not called to be vulnerable with everybody in the same way. You are not called to be 100% open or honest. You are not called to bear your most secret of secrets with everybody. There are some people in your life you may need to now see are unsafe for you. This is why they've hurt you in the past. This is the damage that they've done. You can love them, you can care for them, you can support them, you can laugh with them, you can even spend time with them. But if they are unsafe, you would be wise to have healthy boundaries in what your relationship looks like. And give God time to work on them and in them and through them so that maybe they can begin to move to be safe too. Do you tell an unsafe person that they're unsafe? Depends how unsafe they are. Depends about what. Depends how open you feel they are to hearing your perspective, which means sometimes the answer is no, you don't. Because you are not God, and God can help them or come alongside them through some other avenue than you. Especially if this is a person who's hurt you a great deal. Yeah, you may not be the person that God uses to help them become more safe. But of course, that's about other people. You need to begin to have the language and the verbiage of seeing them as safe or unsafe, maybe identifying what you think is unsafe about people that are close to you, maybe even in your home. But you can't leave it there. One of the traits of unsafe people is they do not take responsibility for themselves. They blame other people. They may apologize, but they don't ever change. Yet don't be one of those people today. If you and I are going to take this serious and we want to become more safe, we want to get on board with what God is trying to do in our lives and in the world, then you and I have to take responsibility for this. And as you look over that yellow sheet, as you read through the 2 chapters in the blue book on what it means to be unsafe, there is no doubt in my mind that you will find at least one thing, one way that you are unsafe for some of the most important people in your life. Now what are you going to do? What will you do? Are you just going to let it go? Or are you going to leave here today and think, gosh, I felt terrible about myself, but whew, I'll go have a drink and watch the NFL and things will be better tomorrow morning? I hope not. Because you're proving the point that maybe you're not the safest person in the world if you do. You have to own this, just like I do. Yes, I know how I, when I am bad Chris, can be unsafe for my beautiful wife Heather and my beautiful kids Shiloh and Eli. I know it. And I probably don't know the whole of it, but I know some of it. And I am willing to own it. And I'm willing to manage it. And I am willing to let God's Spirit begin to correct it. And that's the only way that I will ever become more safe for them. You need to do the same thing. And the people that you love the most will benefit the most from that simple choice. Would you pause for a minute here at the end of the message? And I'll give you a moment or two in the quiet to interact with God about what you heard today. And then I'll pray for us all.